Here's a quick question. Are you self-aware? If you said yes, you're in good company. 95% of people believe that they have self-awareness. But here's the problem. In one of the largest studies on the topic, only about 10 to 15% of people actually meet the criteria for being self-aware. So there's a decent chance that this video is about you. And if you think that it isn't, well, that might actually be a bigger clue that it actually is. Hi, I'm Rob Volpe, the empathy activist, and welcome to this edition of Reading Between the Lines, where we explore how empathy shows up in our everyday lives. Today, we're talking about self-awareness, why almost all of us overestimate it, the one question that actually builds it, and the surprising reason that you can't get there alone. This episode of Reading Between the Lines connects directly to the new podcast limited series that my empathy wonder twin, Maria Ross, and I have just launched, called What Does It Mean to Be Human? I'll have more on that at the end, but first, let's talk about that 95% number. So there's an organizational psychologist by the name of Tasha Eurich, and she spent 4 years studying self-awareness with nearly 5,000 people. And in her research, she found that gap that I mentioned, where nearly everyone believes that they're self-aware, but very few actually are. So before you go make that list of all the people in your life where you think, oh yeah, they're definitely not self-aware, just pause. Because that instinct pointing the lens at everyone but ourselves is exactly how that gap survives. And here's why this matters for empathy. As you know, the first of the 5 steps to empathy is dismantle judgment. And that's the hardest. And the hardest judgments to dismantle are the ones that we hold about ourselves without even knowing it. You can't see somebody else clearly through a lens that you've never examined yourself. It's like when my glasses are dirty and I need to clean them. That's that self-exploration and what we need to be doing in order to be self-aware. When I talk in my presentations about dismantling judgment, I tell the audience, like, there's no magic bullet. There's no easy pill to take that's going to fix it. There's 3 things that people can do. And the first one is to have self-awareness. Self-awareness comes up multiple times in my talks about empathy because it's so critical to have in order to be able to see the other person that's in front of you. It's kind of like you can't see the person standing in front of you if you're not able to see yourself first. So what do we do to try to become more self-aware? We introspect and we ask ourselves, why? Why did I feel that way? Why did I snap? Why did I have that reaction? Why am I like this? And it could feel productive, but it's actually a trap because when they looked at the interviews with people that are genuinely self-aware, what they found was that the word why barely shows up, but the word what appeared constantly. And I also loved this because one of the things that I'm always advocating for with step 2, asking good questions, is to eliminate the word why. Urich's team stated, we don't actually have conscious access to most of our own motives. So when we ask why, our brain doesn't come back and go, oh, there's insufficient data. It tries to invent an answer, one that feels true, and then we end up defending it. This is very similar to how I talk about, if you've heard me talk about the dangers of asking why or using the word why, where I'll elaborate and say, from the time that you were a young child, if you did something wrong, you're asked, why did you do that? And this is that same tension point. You can't figure out exactly why you did something, but you actually, as a child, know you're going to get in trouble. And so you end up inventing an answer. It feels true. It may be more or less true. And then we end up defending it because we don't want to get in trouble. We want to be able to get through that. So instead, use what, as they talk about here, and that's what I'm going to focus on. But you can also use who, what, where, when, and how. Turn the question around, take why out. And when you're talking to somebody else, you're going to find that they are not as defensive. They're not going to be inventing answers. They're going to be much more open. And of course, the same thing would be true for ourselves. And additionally, when we're asking ourselves, why did you do that? Why did I say that thing on that call to the client on Thursday? that pulls us down into this rumination. We all go into this or risk running into it. It's a spiral into fear and insecurity. And, we call that reflection, but it's actually just ruminating where we're spinning round and round and round. And we need to actually be able to pull ourselves out. And that also then takes work. And that's because we asked ourselves why instead of saying what. And I was researching for this. It was really surprising because, yeah, that actually does make sense. And as I think about, I like to think that I'm self-aware and in that 10 to 15%. But as I think about the questions that I'll ask myself, I think I've evolved over time where I am doing more of the what happened. And that's the fix to this. It's just one word. Instead of why, ask what. Because the what questions keep you objective about yourself in the same way that it opens up the other person. It's pointing everything forward. And it gives you something to do. It gives you what to think about. So I'll share, there's a story that I found. Urich, during her research, she tells the story of a man who hated his job. And he didn't ask, why do I feel so terrible? He asked, what are the situations that make me feel terrible and what do they have in common? And that question changed his career. And this reminds me of when I hear from parents how they changed what they were asking their kids. Instead of using why, they would use tell me more about that, inspired by the title of my book. Or they would use a what question or how instead. And the kids weren't defensive. They were able to open up. And it's the same thing. The same thing works with you too. So something that you could try today. 3 quick questions. First one is, what am I feeling right now in this moment? What is actually triggering it? And what would help? And these are all pretty similar types of questions. And as I said, not using why, substituting what is very similar to what we talk about with asking good questions. The second of the 5 steps, you want to stay open, curious. There's no verdict attached. These are questions that can help build empathy for others and build honesty with ourselves. So give that a try. The 3 questions: what am I feeling right now? What is actually triggering it? And what would help? And you can ask yourself this right in this moment as you're listening to this. You can do it later on throughout your day. But let me know how it goes. When I was stepping into this topic, we call the episode The Aware Animal. It's the first episode of this limited edition series on what it means to be human. And we're thinking about awareness as it relates to humans compared to other animals, but also compared to AI. And so looking at it from that perspective, but as I was researching for this newsletter in particular, and how might I build or elaborate on it, one of the things I came across is that there's actually 2 kinds of self-awareness. There's internal self-awareness, which is how clearly you can see yourself. And then there's the external self-awareness. So how accurately do you understand how others see you? And you can be good at one, but it doesn't mean that you're good at the other. And sometimes you can just be bad at both. But how clearly do you see yourself? That's internal self-awareness. How clearly do you understand who you are and what makes you tick? And what are you feeling? Where is that coming from? And what can help? And then externally, how accurately do you understand how others see you? And so a lot of times there's a recommendation to journal and to be introspective, to meditate, reflect. But if you do that, that's internal. If you do that introspective work without the outside input, you're actually becoming an echo chamber. You're just confirming a story that you already believe about yourself. And so you want to get that outside input. Tasha Urich in her research called them loving critics, the people that care about you enough to be honest and are honest enough to be useful. So think about that for a sec. You cannot fully know yourself by yourself. You need other people that know you to tell you. And I think that's why it's so important for us to hear from loving critics. could be friends, could be family members, providing, as I say, constructive feedback, positive feedback, encouragement, but in ways that are useful to other people. You cannot fully know yourself by yourself. And this isn't something that AI can actually do. AI is a very different construct, especially the large language models, the generative AI that we're working with today. Something I'm really mindful of, I've talked about it in other editions, is the idea of general intelligence and what's being worked on and probably coming in the next few years, and how much they're going to have an influence. And understanding that, Maria and I felt it was important to help people reflect on what does it mean to be human? How do we think about ourselves? How do other people see us? How do we compare to other species? You're going to hear a lot about me and the cats, and Maria talking about dogs and other animals. We talk about Michael Pollan's research. His most recent book was about consciousness. Really fascinating conversations. We do not proclaim to have all the answers, but we do want to explore it. And everything that we talk about in these 6 episodes, it all ends up coming back to the same place. And that's this point of connection and empathy and the importance there. And this is exactly why Maria and I made What Does It Mean to Be Human? And in particular, this first episode called The Aware Animal. We were really curious as we were talking about consciousness and self-awareness, how it relates to other animals and species. Do they even exhibit that? Like one of my cats is down there, so I'm looking at him. Is there consciousness? What's going on in there? Is there self-awareness? Like, do they reflect on what they're thinking about or what they're feeling and where that's coming from? Not so sure, but then also don't know. But you can hear us talk more about that on the podcast. And that's just the first episode. There's a total of 6. They're coming out every week. The first one is already out wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of Maria's show, The Empathy Edge. I'm putting a link in the show notes here, but it's on all the different platforms. So go listen and come back and then tell me. I'd love to hear who your loving critic is, that person that you trust to tell you the truth about yourself. I'd also love to hear what you thought of that first episode. Please give that show a follow, a rating, a review. It all helps. So share your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the newsletter at readingbetweenthelines.beehive.com and make sure that you are following the show here as well. So stay curious, ask good questions, and let the empathy flow. Have a great day.